not very long ago, I had a young person came in and they got out a flask with coffee, then a biscuit, and then something else did come out. We had a flask of water, despite water being on the table. And I thought we're going to have a 3-course meal if we're not careful.
What a legend!
Welcome to episode 3 of The Right Route. In series 1, we're talking about why it's important for you to find the right route to help you succeed in the world of work. If you haven't already, then check out episode 1 where we discuss the options you have available and how you can decide which is best for you. In this episode, we're continuing our discussion of how you can prepare for the world of work, which we already started in episode 2. So again, if you haven't already, don't forget to go back to episode 2 to discover the key steps to help you be ready. If you're already armed with the tips that we shared in episode 2, then get ready to discover interview tips and what you need to make your CV stand out. That will help to give you that extra advantage. In this episode, we're also going to talk about the great opportunities traineeships and apprenticeships can offer you. I'm sure that many of you have heard of apprenticeships, where you get to learn and earn whilst being employed. But for those of you thinking, what is a traineeship? Simply put, a traineeship allows you to learn more about the world of work while showing the employer you're working with how you can fit into their team. First up in this episode, we talk to Dawn Greenwood, a youth development tutor, alongside Zahra, a pre-employment apprentice. Both are based in Bradford and they provide us with their industry knowledge and advice on all things surrounding skills and gaining employment. So Dawn, could you just explain to the listener, if they're a little bit unsure, we've kind of explained what a traineeship is, but you've been so instrumental with helping people through their traineeships. Could you just explain what it is for people who are a bit unsure?
So a traineeship is kind of a stepping stone to an apprenticeship. Okay. It's a vocational learning programme aimed at helping young people gain the skills that they need to get into work. So when young people come out of school, probably never worked before, never had experience of any type of work before, it gives them those skills. So it gets them into the workplace so that they can learn on the job. Even simple things like, getting to work on time, how to speak to people in a work environment, because it's very different to an educational environment, and therefore giving them those beneficial skills on the CV to then get them into work or an apprenticeship. I
mean, I suppose that's a really important thing, isn't it? That education after your GCSEs isn't necessarily something that everybody wants to go to or that they're suited
Absolutely.
to. Have you got kind of any advantages or disadvantages of what a traineeship could offer somebody?
So traineeship, obviously, it puts them ahead of the game, so to speak. So they're getting all those skills in the workplace, learning about the working environment. I suppose you could say that on the downside, it's unpaid. However, the benefits outweigh that because the gaining skills then go on to get a paid job.
I think that's so important for those people who are fed up a little bit of education. And education is important, but it might not necessarily suit people's learning styles because we all learn differently, don't we?
Absolutely. And I think certain vocations as well are ones where it's better to learn on the job. So, I know you can maybe stay on and do a health and social care qualification at college, etc., but you are only getting textbook information, whereas when you're out there in the field and you're doing it, you're still gaining that qualification if you're going on to apprenticeship, but you're getting those skills so you know what it's like.
You can read as much as you want about putting a bandage on, but until you actually have to physically put a bandage on somebody, you don't do it. Yeah. Is that something you'd agree with?
Yeah, definitely. So something you might have done in college in childcare is so different to when you're actually doing it because there's so much more things you wouldn't have learnt in college. And
for people listening to this episode, it's all about them finding the right route for them. How can people find out more information about traineeships?
As in here in Bradford.
Well, Bradford and the Wine, if you.
Yeah, so we've got a Kickstart Centre in Bradford that is predominantly for traineeships for people to get information and advice. Cube Learning website, government website that's all about traineeships.
So if anyone is in Bradford, do they have to make an appointment or how do they get in touch?
No, they can just walk in. They can walk in and make an appointment with lovely Zahra, who would be on the desk, who will then set up the first session on basically getting information and guidance on the vocational learning programme.
So if people are listening and they're thinking about how to prepare themselves for the world of work, I know that's something that you do a lot of in the traineeship world and in apprenticeships as well. But what tips and advice would you give people looking to prepare for that first job?
For the interview for a job or?
Yeah, and interviews. Any
Yeah, so
kind
if
of
we were preparing for interviews, what we usually do with our students is we do a lot of research on, obviously, the company that you're going for the interview for, body language techniques in interviews, making sure that you know before you go in what questions you're going to ask in an interview.
Anything else you can think of, Zahra? Or it's okay
I
if not?
think the interview is really important because that's the first impression you make on the employer, but also timekeeping, because they're not all going to be used to getting up on time after they've had a long holiday, so getting them prepared to go in on time. So we might tell them to come in the morning, for example, 9 o'clock, just so they're used to waking up early.
Yeah, if you're used to waking up at 12 midday, then 9 o'clock seems very, very early, doesn't it? So yeah, fantastic piece of advice there. If people are a bit unsure about what job they want to do, or if they're looking for a particular job but they're not sure how to get an interview, any tips and advice that you could offer the listener?
Get some work experience to go on your CV first so it looks better than anybody else's. Traineeship.
When young people are going into perhaps a first experience of work, or perhaps coming in to learn a bit more about the whole thing, are there any particular skills that people need to know before going into the world of work that would help them out? Perhaps things that they might not necessarily been taught at school, because I know schools aren't necessarily preparing people in the greatest possible way.
Yeah, possibly how to behave in the workplace would be a big one, because they come out of school with bad habits, so to speak. How to communicate with people of different ages, because they will have used to being with people their own age. Simple things like young people going into a workplace and using text language is a big one. You know, when they're asked to maybe write an email, and there's some bad habits in there coming from school, definitely.
Yeah.
Not using the mobile phone is a huge one. They don't understand that you can't use your mobile phone just all day, every day at work.
You're nodding away there, Zahra. Do you see a lot of people doing that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you got any advice on that, Zahra, that you wanted to pass on?
When they're preparing to go for like a job interview or their first job, they should look into the employer, because a lot of people, they just go there thinking they enjoy it. Not they enjoy it, but they think they know what they're getting themselves into when really they don't. So I think they should do a lot of preparation and research the company beforehand.
I think that's so important, isn't it? For people who have got onto the traineeship ladder, or even the apprenticeship ladder, how can they progress on to the next level? What kind of opportunities are there for them to improve on what they've done so far?
Yeah, so like our steps to success would be traineeship to apprenticeship/job, and then maybe higher apprenticeship, degree apprenticeships in the workplace. So you can still get to the educational level you want to get to by doing vocational learning.
Zahra, you're a fantastic example of that, because you started on from traineeships, didn't you?
Yeah.
And now you've moved on to an apprenticeship. So is that something that you was aware of before doing that?
I didn't really know much about traineeships when I left school. All I'd ever heard about was apprenticeships, sixth form, uni. So I think not many people will be aware of traineeships.
So who are traineeships for then?
So traineeships are aimed at 16 to 24-year-olds who are coming out of school, who've decided that they don't want to stay on at school and college, etc., and want to go down a more vocational learning programme, but it is classed as full-time education.
So because people have to stay in education till they're 18, that is a potential route for people. Fantastic.
Traineeships and apprenticeships.
Anything you can think of, advice or anything that you're unaware of? Or
I'd say maths and English, you wouldn't, it's not many people think that you'll be able to do that whilst on a traineeship. And because it's all work-based learning, it makes it so much easier, because then they don't have to travel. Anyway, they can just stay in their workplace and we come to them to help them their maths and English.
I think that's a great point. I think that's sound. And from your experience, do you have to do much more studying because you've got a job at the same time, or?
With me now, with the apprenticeship, I think it's made it so much easier, because everything I'm doing on the apprenticeship is relevant to the qualifications. I just have to find evidence for it. So by doing a traineeship, it's helped so much with the apprenticeship, because all the skills you'd need for that also helped me with the theory side of it as well.
Mm-hmm. So I know that, like, from my days of education at being at school, when I was learning Pythagoras' theorem, as amazing as that is, and I'm sure that's wonderful for people who need to use it in their day jobs, but I haven't had to refer to it ever since then. Yeah. So would it be fair to say that it's all pretty relevant stuff that you're teaching people?
Yeah, and when it comes to the English and maths, it's functional skills, so it's functionality and using the English and maths in the workplace.
Okay.
It makes more sense to...
So it relates to the subject that people are talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Throughout this episode, we've made reference to certain websites and resources that were made available for you. Simply click on the show notes and find the email address where you'll be able to get access to all of those. Next up in this episode, we catch up with Liz Hemsley, the Bradford Area Manager for Prospects, alongside Jenny Sullivan, the Centre Coordinator for Cube Learning's Kickstart Centre, which can be found in Bradford. Let's learn from their expertise, especially in regards to what an employer is looking for. So thanks to both Liz and Jenny for joining us on the right route, and thank you for sharing your expertise and knowledge with the listener. Could you just explain briefly what it is that you do, just to give the listener a bit of a background on what your roles are?
Mm-hmm. Hi, I work for Prospects, and as part of Prospects we manage the Connections contract in the Bradford area. Connections exists in some places throughout the country, but certainly we're big in Bradford.
Well, Liz, it's a pleasure having you today. Looking
Thank
forward
you.
to hearing what you have to share. And we also have Jenny here. How are you doing, Jenny?
Hello. So I work for Cube Learning at the Kickstart Centre in Bradford. It's a drop-in centre for young people looking for careers advice, thinking about doing vocational training. So I meet them as they come in and set them on the course of a traineeship.
So what we have today, listeners, we've got two people who both work in the field of careers. So we're going to be sharing lots of tips and tricks on how you can get your career going too.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I'd just like to ask the first question of, if people are preparing to jump into the world of work, any tips or guidance of things you think they can do to start preparing for actual switching from potentially education to the world of work? Because I know it is quite a jump for some people.
It's the P's, isn't it? That's the important word. Preparation and planning. Research the organisation. You know, this is if they know what they want to do. Research the organisation, read your information, check the job that you're going for, and look at your skills and personal qualities. Because, you know, you can guarantee at interview you will be asked about those. Plan your journey. And that's really, really important, because, you know, some people arrive half an hour early.
Is that really bad, or is that okay?
If you're an employer and you're interviewing at 9 o'clock in the morning and somebody stood on the door at 8:30, you're thinking, oh, I've got to get them sorted out. So whilst it's good, I would recommend check out the layout, get there sort of 10 minutes beforehand. I mean, equally, we don't want people arriving later either. If something happens and you're on a bus or train and you are going to be late, for goodness sake, phone ahead. Let the employer know that where you are. Dress appropriately, I think that goes without saying, doesn't it?
You would think so.
Yeah.
It seems like Jenny's got a story. Jenny, like, can we open up the Jenny story box? I think we would like to hear, Jenny, what happened?
I do it. No, there's no specific stories. You just...
It's not generally an assumption that we should make for some people that they consider that to be a thing then?
No, you might think that it's obvious what to wear for an interview, but it's only obvious to someone who's been to an interview before, who maybe someone with a bit of experience is a little bit older. I mean, I might look back and think, well, I wouldn't wear that to an interview now. I probably would. But it is, you know, if you don't know.
I mean, one of the questions that, you know, at an interview, a young person can actually ask is, can I just check on what the dress code is? And because we normally have sort of smart casual 4 days of the week, and we have dress down Friday. So, you know, there's different things, and young people need to check.
So do you think then a young person coming as a dress down, is that okay, or would you rather them always suited and booted, or?
If you actually as a company have a dress down day, that's fine. But otherwise, when it's smart casual, I don't expect people to wear jeans, trainers, which is what sometimes they do like that, don't they, Jenny?
Yeah.
However, many times you tell them.
I used to work in hospitality, and when I was interviewing people, it wasn't so much what they were wearing, just, you know, if they're presenting themselves well, if they're clean and tidy. I didn't really mind if they were wearing jeans, because it wasn't they wouldn't be working in an environment that was really corporate. So it didn't really matter what they were wearing as long as they smelled okay.
They smell okay. Yeah. In hospitality, I think that's key, right? Yeah. You got to smell good, right?
Yeah. But it's as an employer, what you're actually doing when you have someone in front of you, you're imagining, could I see them fitting into my workforce? And how they first present and first image, that's really, really important. And water's normally provided at interview, but not very long ago, I had a young person came in, they actually got the coffee out, and then they got the biscuits out.
The person going for an interview?
The young person.
They brought out... Hold on, wait. Can we just pause here and try to understand this? Hold on, wait. I just need to get my head around this. So the guy A guy or a girl?
It was
it?
actually a guy.
It was a guy, right? So the guy, so Liam, are you hearing this?
Morning, and they got out. There was water on the table, and they got out a flask with coffee. Then a biscuit came out.
What kind of biscuit was it?
Oh, is that important? I guess, is that a key? Is that a key element?
Got the job on, not
Oh, right, okay.
To be quite honest, I was just thinking, I was so bemused. I kept thinking, what's going to come out next? And then something else did come out. We had a flask of water, despite water being on the table. And I thought we're going to have a 3-course meal if you're not careful.
What a legend.
It was absolutely, and that was just somebody, I couldn't believe it.
Well, the main question is, though, did they get a yes? Did they get a job?
Did not.
Oh, no. After all of that.
No, it was, so young people, yes, plan ahead, but go along with the employer. Okay. Don't take it too casual, just try and relax. Most employers will say at the beginning, they want you to relax because they want to put you at ease. Because an employer wants to get the best out of somebody. It's not, and it's a two-way process, isn't it? Working out, would I want to work for that employer?
True. Like, yes, I think a lot of people do need to remember that even though you're going to interview, in a way, you're interviewing them too. Don't be afraid to ask them a question like, do you really want to be working?
Exactly, and we give brownie points if somebody at the end of the interview, when you ask, have you got questions you'd like to ask us? They all say, yes, can I ask you this? Or
okay, so what is a good question? Me and Liam we were chatting about this. What did we say, Liam, again?
We were trying to figure out. We said try to avoid the generic ones that makes you seem like you haven't really put much thought into it, and try and have an authentic question that is valid. We weren't sure whether it would be advisable to ask about pay as well.
It's not normally a good one if it's actually been advertised on the advert.
Yeah.
That's
if it
not
isn't,
really a good one. I mean, it might be. You could say, if it was put politely, can I check? I don't think when I look through the information, pay was mentioned, but only you make sure you haven't missed it, because it doesn't normally go down well talking about money at the first stage. It's much better if someone says, can I just check about training and development, because I am keen to develop in blah, 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 blah. So, that's what goes down well.
Definitely. I mean, one thing we said about the question being asked is just like you said, don't ask a question that they think you should already know. It just goes that you didn't check. Like it was right there in black and white. Like I don't know if you saw grey, but it was there in black and white.
Yeah, exactly. But the other thing is, if they can't think of a question and an employer says, have you got anything? Swing it round and say, well, thank you so much. You've actually answered everything in the course of the interview.
Yes, that is it, man. That's a good blagging. I like that. Can we highlight that? I like that one.
I did have a question, however, you've already answered it.
Yeah, you really answered it.
Amazing interview.
And it makes the employer feel very good as well.
Oh my God, double whammy. Can you interview me?
So Jenny, with the young people that come into the centre, are there any kind of common things that you're finding that people kind of need to develop skills on and think about to prepare them for the world of work?
I think most people who come in, they have a lot of them are just out of school, they've never had a job before, and it's just about getting the work experience. So getting them out into placement is the most important thing for them, and it's when they're there that they sort of learn that you need to be on time, because at school, if you're not on time, what's the worst that can happen? You get told off by the head teacher maybe, but if you're not turning up to work on time when you've got a real job, it is an issue. And you'd think it'd be obvious, but it's not obvious to people, and they kind of need to understand that. And the reason they're at work is, it's to benefit them. They had to go to school. Someone had to, they had to make sure that they were at school. If they didn't turn up, someone would chase them. But if they're not turning up to work, they're just not going to have a job anymore.
Mm-hmm. It's something that I spoke to Zahra. She mentioned how also people's attention to their phone as well.
Mobile phones are continually a problem, and that's including, it can be with other members of staff as well. And last week we just had enough and took phones off people when they arrived at 9 a.m. And gave them back at 4 o'clock.
So what? They were coming to you fierce.
Yeah.
So what's happening? So they came to work and just were on Facebook, Snapchat all day.
Yeah, just when they should actually be doing some work. And people are spending too much time, and when they have a break, it's fair enough. Do what you want in your lunchtime, or when you have a morning, afternoon break, but not in an employer's time.
So is it going to what you're saying then, Jenny, that like you said, if you go to school, what's the worst can happen? The head teacher will shout at you. My head teacher was nice. I wouldn't mind him shouting at me.
Yeah,
but
it's like sitting outside the headmaster's office.
So do you think then that some young people don't understand the transition then between work and school is a complete different ball game? Is that what you find?
Yeah, there's actually a gap for some young people. because they might not have had any work experience in a school or college setting. They don't actually understand the world of work. And this is why traineeships are so good, because it's for young people who aren't quite ready for an apprenticeship and they need to understand more about attitude, getting up in the morning, behaving as adults really, not as if you're in a school. And you know, even today I went out to 3 young people and I said, we're not in school now. You've got to cut it. You need to get on with some work. This is what an employment is all about, because although in a traineeship they might not be paid, and they're still in a work setting, and we are getting them ready to go into employment, and that's what it's all about.
I think like something that we touched on a little bit there was the softer skills as well. And I think that sometimes when you're looking at people's CVs or you're looking at a job description, actually, often you have lists of responsibilities or key skills that people would have. What would your expectations be of soft skills? Are they just something that you, as an employer, would assume that a student's got? Or is there certain things that people can perhaps look towards practicing before they get into that world of employment?
I don't think as an employer we can actually assume anything.
Well, nothing at all. Not even like the competency in the role. Like,
yeah, I mean, so I think it's really important that young people do have CVs, up-to-date CVs, but whatever they put on the CVs, they need to be prepared to be asked about questions on it. And certainly, I mean, in this area, we get a lot of young people who come to us and say, well, I've got nothing to put down. And it's really boosting them up, looking at the background, saying, right, okay, you might not have worked. What do you do in your social life? Do you attend anything?
yeah, there's transferable skills,
Exactly.
right? Yeah.
Are you part of a team? And trying to bring out the best in everyone so they can, you know, they've got something to sell to employers.
So even if they haven't got anything to put on a CV, they can still put something down.
We would
There's
find
always
something.
something.
We would
So
find
you'll find
something.
like what? Like, I mean, okay, I'm a 16-year-old, just left school, never had a job. What can I say?
Were you in the sports team at school?
Yeah, I played football for a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, so teamwork, you like
Okay.
doing that. And commitment, you had to turn up to training, you had to turn up on time.
True. So where can people find this advice then? It's like, how can people get help like this on CVs?
Well, if they go down to the Connection Centre, we actually do the advisors there will work with people on doing the CVs.
And as part of the
the role, yeah.
traineeship, you'll always leave the traineeship with a CV. We'll do one at the end.
Just to let the listener know, we are going to put links in the show notes just to where you can find connection centres and some various resources. So by all means, check those out as well.
I remember for me, it's like when I was young growing up, I mean, at the time, we just had a platform called Fast Tomato. Do any of you remember Fast Tomato?
Tomato.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
You remember Fast Tomato?
Yes,
Yeah, it's like, we just had to go on Fast Tomato to find careers. Like, that was our
Oh, like Indeed?
Yeah, but like that, but a throw, but that's what we kind of had. Similar, I guess,
More interactive.
back in the day, like,
Kudos.
back in the day. So that's what we kind of had to go to. But I mean, how do you think young people can find jobs? Like, what can they do?
I think over the years things have really changed. So young people need to check out what's online. There's a long list of websites that they can go to. For example, the apprenticeship search, find apprenticeships. That's a really popular one. But indeed, you've mentioned Indeed. There's Monster. There's lots of other websites.
I love how these
that are
jobs
available.
website names are just random words. Indeed, Monster. What is Indeed or Monster got to do with a job? I don't know. I'm going to create a job website and call it Microphone. Do you know what I mean? It's just a random, but.
So one thing like I've got a question on is if people are still looking at Indeed and Monster and these various sites, but they're not really finding something that they would particularly find interesting, is it that that's the only place they could go?
All the sites vary in what's on them. I mean, I would certainly advise young people, if they don't know what they want to do, the first thing they need is a proper information advice and guidance interview with one of the Connections advisors, who can then signpost out in different directions and onto different learning opportunities. You can use social media as well. People have set up accounts on LinkedIn. There's all different routes really. There are quite a lot of recruitment agencies around here, and some of the recruitment agencies might have young people who are in for a few weeks and then then are out, and then go back a few days later. So there are a lot of recruitment agencies, but I would say it's looking at sort of the amount of support a young person needs as to whether that route's the most appropriate for them. It's also just making speculative applications. If somebody's got a decent CV, they can send it out to lots and lots of employers and see if they get anything back, which hopefully they will.
Absolutely perfect advice. But for anyone listening who's perhaps having a tough time with that at the moment, obviously you come in and have a consultation, but how do you think people should kind of respond if they either just don't get an answer, because in this day and age it's an employer's world and sometimes you just don't get a response, but equally, let's say they got to that interview and they were unsuccessful, what would you say to young people who are perhaps struggling with that?
Right. Most employers at interview will say, we will contact you within a time scale and we'll let you know the outcome of the interview, and they will actually feed back to the employee. I've run people to say you haven't got a job and you've got the answer phone, and if that person's really interested, they'll bring you back and say, can you just help me, what went wrong? And that's the important thing, that they find out what went wrong so it doesn't happen again.
It's hard and it's awful. You can apply for so many jobs. No, you don't hear back from anyone. Finally get an interview, you don't get the job, and it's awful. And when young people come in and see me and tell me that, and I feel awful for them, because I've been in that position before. Applying for jobs.
Hurts, right?
Yeah, it's awful. But you know what? It wasn't the job for you. That one wasn't. They might not have thought loved you, but equally, if you'd have worked there, you probably wouldn't have loved them that much, because you just didn't fit right together. And you will get there. You've just got to keep going and keep going.
And that's really sound advice. It's just keeping at it, because I've interviewed people and I've thought, 3 of them are really, really good, and I've now got to make a decision. And you've then got to feed back to somebody, you were really good but not quite as good,
It's easier said
and
than done.
it's really hard. But any decent employer will actually feed back to a young person as to how they can actually improve themselves and improve their skills.
In your experience, do employers also keep kind of names of potential people if other roles come up, or is it just
back to the pool again?
Again, it depends. It depends on the size of your employers. If someone stands out really well in your mind, and there's a few people I've invited back and to see me separately, fed back, you didn't get that, but would you be interested if something comes up in the future? And they've said yes, and we keep those on file. But all the others, I think because of the amount of applications you're dealing with, you can't afford to do so. So how somebody impresses at interview that first time, it's the impression. First impressions are essential.
And talking about interview, have any of you ever asked weird questions at an interview, tried to catch?
I love
what's your favorite? You say you love it. Like what? What's your favourite biscuit? Go on, hit me then, Jenny. Go on.
Well, once I was doing interviews in my old job in hospitality, and it was the first time I'd ever done an interview. I was so excited. I thought, I'm just going in there. I'm going to hire someone. And then this list of ridiculous questions like, what cocktail would you be? If you were an animal, what would you be? I love that. And then I went in and I didn't ask any of them. I was too scared, because I found doing the interview more nerve-wracking than being interviewed. I absolutely hated it.
As an interviewer, what are you looking for if somebody is asked that kind of question? Like I've been asked what fruit or vegetable before as well. So do you know?
What were you looking for?
I mean, I'm not sure.
Yeah, what do you want to hear? What do you want to hear?
I think it doesn't really matter what they say, as long as they have a think. I mean, if they just say, I'd be a dog, because I like dogs, I'd be like, no. You've got to have a little bit of a reason. Okay. As long as you can back up what you're saying, I don't care what animal you're going to be.
I think it's important that young people realise that in not only preparing for a job, they can actually prepare for interviews, because whichever interview they do for whatever job, there are standard questions that will come up. And it's knowing what the questions are that they can prepare in advance. Yeah,
we do a lot of that in the traineeships, preparing for interviews,
so
interview
what's some typical
skills.
questions and what is going to come up regardless?
Okay, there's normally one, you would normally start with, tell me about yourself. We normally say we want you to relax into it.
I saw a meme on social media. It goes, the question said, tell me about yourself. Yeah. And he said, I'd rather not, I really want this job.
That's brilliant. I like that. Yeah. I mean,
Sounds like that answer.
Would you like that answer? You know, I can see what type of person Jenny is right now.
It's a good job I'm not in charge of a company. People, really.
So normally I would say something like, tell me about your three skills or strengths, and then some young people can't think of any, so I would then swing it round and say, right, if one of your friends had to say 3 things about you, what do you think they'd say? And they can actually quite often get it if you ask them. And sometimes young people have said, I don't like to boast about myself.
You know, that's true, you know, it is a hard one. I even found that I was on The Apprentice, if you knew, and like even in the boardroom, it's like we have to, you know, big yourself on what you've done in the task, and it's like it's a British thing being very reserved. Yeah, and be like, I'd rather someone else sing my praises than me sing them myself.
But if you're going for an interview with 40 other people, you've got to be prepared to sell yourself. Yeah. And, you know exactly what you're going to say in advance.
And how do you do it not coming across arrogant? Like we're discussing before, Lynn, how do you do it as not coming across too arrogant? Like, how do you do it in a tactful way where it's not like they're just boastful, or you just not care? They just...
I think people are just to be honest. You know, honest about themselves, about the skills, the personality, because it is a selling game when there's a lot of people have to think. Similarly, one of the questions is, what about your weaknesses?
Ooh.
And that's an interesting one.
I don't have any. Is that not a good answer?
I hate that question. I hate that question.
So how do you answer that one then?
You can actually turn a negative into a positive by saying things like, I like to make things happen. I get frustrated if too long spent sitting around discussing a project, or you know, there's ways that whatever the job is, you can turn it into a positive. You know, one of my problems is I do tend to work too hard. I sometimes have to turn off.
But then, as an interviewer, do you not just see? but then, if you're interviewing someone, can't you just see they're just going to sell you anything? Just like if someone generally said what their weakness is, like, I really don't like working. Like, do you know what I mean? No one's really going to tell you the honest weakness.
I'd rather be at home watching television.
Yeah, so it's like, how do you, is it?
Yeah, I think you get used to it, because any sort of, as an interview progresses, it's a 2-way process, and it becomes quite a natural flow as you're chatting to them.
Like our flow kind of now.
Yeah, a bit similar, and you'd be amazed what you find out. And I often find out an awful lot between picking someone up from where they've been seated to bring them into the interview, and then seeing them out the premises, because you've asked your standard things, which obviously you've got to ask, and then just as you're walking out the door, you might just throw something at them, and they respond more naturally, and it's amazing.
I got the right people. Would you shout to somebody?
What do you mean? So they're leaving the door. Yeah. So what are you going to shout to them? Like,
it might be not shouting. It might be as they're walking down the corridor. So, are you going to get a bus now? And you know, they might say, "Oh, I hate going on a bus," or you know, "I don't drive," or something. I'm like, "Oh, really?" That didn't come out in your interview. So you know, you can find out all sorts just by talking to people.
Moral of the story: don't get any balloons.
Yeah. So I suppose what my advice is, if I swing it round, remember from the minute for a young person you walk in the door. Yeah. Okay, even though it might seem relaxed, you're offered coffee, it's casual, you are being inspected all the time, and don't forget that.
It's the little things in it sometimes. I read this article about this man, and whenever he was interviewing somebody, he'd always offer them a coffee, and it was what they did with the coffee cup at the end of the interview that decided whether they got the job or not. So if they just... honestly, so if they left it on the table, it'd be like, no, they've got no respect for anyone.
How do you prepare for all of these little, like... Crazy.
It's knowing in advance, isn't it? It's things like, as well, if you're asked, why did you leave your last job? Making sure that, you know, you're not saying anything you shouldn't be about criticising your previous employer.
Don't say anything negative.
You must never say anything negative. That's really, really important, because the employer sat there thinking, well, if they're saying something negative about previous, if they come to us and then leave us, they might be the same. So you're wanting to keep positive and swing it round.
They might also think there's perhaps a slightly different reason to what the person's giving potentially. So another question I have is there a difference between preparing people for one-to-one interviews and group interviews?
I think it's the same rules apply. You're on display all the time, and even when you're having your coffee and your biscuits, people are watching your interaction. Are you a team player? Will you fit in?
Yeah, because when you go for an interview, obviously you're being interviewed by somebody, but if you're walking into the business, you're probably going to see other people who already work there. And if you pay attention to be particularly, friendly to someone else who works there, when their boss comes out, they'll say, I want you to hire him because he worked.
It's like we mentioned before, like, treat the janitor the same way you treat the CEOs. Like, he might just ask the janitor or the cleaner, what was he like to you? If you're not going to respect the cleaner.
Exactly.
And believe me, you often find out more information from cleaners than...
Or the reception. Yeah, for real.
Always be very friendly with your cleaner.
Yeah.
Thanks both for coming today and sharing your knowledge with listeners, and it's been a pleasure, and hope to speak to you again soon. So
Thank you for having us. Thank you then.
So thanks to Dawn, Zahra, Liz and Jenny for their insights. We hope that this has helped you to give you an idea of what employers are looking for and how traineeships and or apprenticeships could help you. Remember to subscribe to be notified when we release new episodes. We'd love to hear your feedback and suggestions. Be sure to use #TheRightRoute. And don't forget to leave us a rating or review in the Apple Podcast or podcast player of your choice, because it really does help the show. We hope this has helped you to find the right route for you. And until next time, take care and we'll speak soon.